Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you are all well on this stupendous Sunday. You're looking absolutely amazing. You must be having a good weekend. Me, I've cut my head. Well, I've cut my nose. I've cut my head. Basically, putting a chair together, like a metal frame chair. Bee comes after me. Bee attacks me. You know, like that Mr. Bean film where it's like man versus bee. It was a bit like that. So I've jumped up to get out of the way of the bee and smacked my face on the metal frame of the chair. So there you go. That sums up my weekend so far. I hope you've had a better one than me. But anyway, let's get straight into the meat and potatoes. This is video 2 of 2 today, 2 of 2, because I'm doing a live tomorrow, which is going to bring everybody together and have an open discussion about why we find ourselves in the camp that we're in, whether we're a pro-burger, whether we're an anti-burger, down the middle, whatever, and see whether we can find some common ground, because that's what I want to try and do. But this morning, I was going over this article here. I'm not going to go through the article again. It was an Idaho news article. If you didn't see video 1, go check it out, because it gives you an idea of what mainstream media, what a lot of the news outlets around the area where the trial is going to take place, what they're pushing, how they're pushing it, and the impact that that can have on people who are watching this and using this as their conduit to information around the Idaho 4 case. And it's quite damning, and when you read it and when it's worded in the way that it is, because it takes out all of the other side of it. What you find with mainstream media is a very one-sided argument. That is the way it is. There is no balance to it. They're either swinging left or they're swinging right. You know what it's like. And with respect to the Idaho 4 case, Bryan Kohberger trial and mainstream media, the vast majority, if not all, I think it would be fair to say that pretty much all outlets in terms of mainstream media, legacy media, the big hitters, if you like, they are reporting Bryan Kohberger as if this is a done deal. And that is having a huge damaging effect on the public perception of this trial. So why do I still support Bryan Kohberger as an individual? And I'll tell you for why. And it is because I'm not mainstream media and I do have access to everything. And we look at everything and we take notice of everything. We don't look at it through biased eyes. We look at every single thing that has been filed by both the prosecution and the defense, and we listen to everybody and what they are saying. And I also live and breathe by a notion that if you are going to execute someone, if the Idaho 4 is going to turn into the Idaho 5, then you have to be absolutely sure, again, beyond a reasonable doubt, that this person did this crime, and that if there is any mitigating circumstances around it, that they are taken into consideration. Now, for Bryan Kohberger, there's obviously this ASD situation in the background. Do I believe that that should give him a pass if he did the crime? That's not for me to determine, because I'm not a medical specialist. But I do think that that should be taken into consideration to ascertain whether this crime happened and Bryan Kohberger did this crime because of being influenced by something connected to ASD. I think it's something that would have to have a discussion around, because, again, I don't think that executing someone should be easy. But again, I'm just going down an extreme route of if Bryan Kohberger is proven beyond a reasonable doubt to have done this crime. Now, do I believe at this stage that Bryan Kohberger has done this crime? I don't think so at all. I genuinely don't. I know that's going to annoy some people, because they're going to turn around and they're going to quote to me things like what we covered in the previous video, and that is that you're just telling mainstream media's version of events, and they aren't that simple. To turn around and say, oh, just explain why Bryan Kohberger's DNA is on that knife sheath then, and the knife sheath was there. And you think to yourself, well, I'm not here to explain that to you, because if you go through all of the court documents yourself, there are specialists who have come out and spoken in depth about the DNA situation, and how trace DNA can travel through the air and land on somebody, and then they touch something, and then someone else touches something, and things can happen. And it has happened in the past. It has happened where people's DNA have been at the crime scene of places. They have been convicted of that crime, and then it turns out that in fact they weren't the person who did it. It's happened in Idaho. We have covered these way back when, and I think I see so many issues with the information that is being brought forward about Bryan Kohberger. There has been nothing, absolutely nothing of any concern, as in character references. Do you know what I mean? We've had people come forward, like Ramsland, for instance, who have come forward and literally said that he was a brilliant student, one of the best that she had dealt with. There's things that have been said by students about his marking and how he was a bit weird, but when you read into that, they are attributes that again can be connected to ASD. And that's why some of these things are so important. Also, in that thing that we read earlier, the report that we heard earlier, it talks about bushy eyebrows and how Dylan Mortensen would turn around and say, well, I saw this person, they look like this, they had bushy eyebrows, and then they strategically put this photograph and say, yeah, look, he's got bushy eyebrows. When the bigger story, if you take everything into consideration, Dylan Mortensen never said that. It would be the fact that she had multiple interviews, and in fact, bushy eyebrows didn't seem to come up until law enforcement had mentioned it, and then that was kind of pushed onto her for her to then go, oh yeah, bushy eyebrows, like she had been led into saying something. So all of these little stories, like the DNA situation, it's like the DNA was extracted from the knife sheath, sent somewhere. They didn't find anything or didn't conclude anything. It gets sent somewhere else, and then the FBI come along. Stop what you're doing. Stop what you're doing. We're going to take it, and then we're going to bring that back. We're going to come to you and give you a name. We're not going to show you any work that we've done or how it was done at all. There's nothing to back that up, and then we're going to scrap all of that, get rid of the whole lot, and just go with DNA was found on the knife sheath. It belonged to Bryan Kohberger, so we did a cheek swab, matched them, but that's not how that went. And again, this is one of the reasons why I support Bryan Kohberger, because I think to myself, there's so many issues around the things that they're classing as evidence that I think that those things deserve an explanation. I think anybody would want to have an explanation, because if this was someone that you loved who was in Bryan Kohberger's position, would you be happy if what you're learning about Bryan Kohberger in that situation, would you be happy if it was for your loved one? And I talk about this multiple times, like having skin in the game. And I would put it to anybody to truly, truly dig deep inside themselves and say, okay, I can appreciate I don't have skin in the game. I don't have skin in the game at all. So I'm coming at this from a perspective, it doesn't really affect me. I'm interested in the case, I'm interested in the trial. I want to know that the person who did this crime is punished for their actions, but equally, it doesn't matter either way. But I'd like people, again, to dig deep and say, okay, how would I think about this crime? How would I think about the way that Bryan Kohberger is being treated in terms of the court process, the evidence process? Let's not forget that a DNA specialist comes forward and puts a question mark on the DNA professionally, and then the FBI basically goes after them. How is that allowed? What, she's not allowed to come forward and tell anybody, to the point where she then has to say, actually, I was wrong. That's coercion. That's coercion of of witnesses. Cy Ray come forward after decades and decades, multiple decades and billions of calls handled, put multiple people in prisons across the United States. He turns around and says there is something wrong with the Bryan Kohberger case, to the point where the judge calls him a conspiracy theorist. And you've got people out there who again are the affectionately known guilters. They don't see a problem with that. They don't see a problem. And I think to myself, if there weren't people out here who was willing to put their necks on the line and their reputations on the line and say, well, I'm going to continue supporting Bryan because there are things around this case that just don't sit right, then what would happen? if there wasn't channels like mine, if there weren't channels like Jay Ombre, if there weren't channels like, Jewels of All Trade, if there weren't channels like Crime Circus, do you know what I mean? Heather, Heather Fitzgerald. And I think to myself, if there weren't these channels that are willing to show people the oddities, the things that just don't seem to sit right, the ever evolving story that is constantly changing around the surviving roommates and what actually happened on the night of the crime, there are so many that has been turned on its head just in the last few days. Completely changed what happened, how it happened, what the communication between them, what was going on, pictures being deleted, pictures being taken, conversations, the reaching out to parents, the seemingly awake for hours, the going dark for a certain period of time, the evidence of a cleanup potentially. This is again throughout the court docs that we're hearing this, not me making it up like someone was trying to say that I'm pushing multiple perpetrator crime. I feel that this is a multiple perpetrator crime, but I'm not the only one. I'm literally talking about it in the court docs by people a lot smarter than me. Do you know what I mean? So there's a lot here. There's a lot to take in, and I feel that for anybody who is sitting there now and saying, look, I believe Bryan Kohberger did it. He did it on his own. What you're seeing, what you're hearing is how it was, and they're not going to question it. I just think that if that's where we are as a society, where you're making it that easy to execute someone and say someone deserves to die, then that's a real sad place to be. And again, I have to believe that there is more to executing someone, that you have to put more effort into trying to stop that process. And and not so much stop it, but making sure that if it's going to happen, then you have got all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed. And in this case, can you truly say that all of the I's have been dotted and the T's have been crossed? Because for me, I don't think they have by a real long. We've got a long way to go. But let me know down below what you think. And again, join me live tomorrow night, and we'll flash it out. We'll have a live where everybody can have their opinion, as long as you don't be a dick. Do you know what I mean? You just say your piece and be adult about it, because we're all adults here and we can actually have a conversation. You don't have to be a prick. Love you all. Enjoy your Sunday, and I will catch you all tomorrow.